Welcome back to Active Ingredients, the leadership series for people who build, scale, and shape the future of life sciences. I'm your host, Tom Dove, founder and CEO of Fraser Dove International, the life sciences talent consultancy. Today's guest is Tom Hochuli, an operator, a CEO, and a military-trained leader whose career has taken him from Army platoon leadership through to some of the most complex manufacturing and operations in the industry. Tom has led across J&J, Lonza, Vibalogix, and multiple PE-backed and high-growth healthcare businesses, building manufacturing organizations, scaling CGT operations, and leading companies through transformation, acquisition, and growth. But what makes Tom's leadership story particularly interesting is how much of it was shaped early, not just by great leadership examples, but by experiencing the kind of leadership he never wanted to come across again. This episode is about adaptable leadership at scale, team DNA, and why the best leaders learn to lead differently depending on the people and environment in front of them. Tom, welcome to Active Ingredients.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate you inviting me.
No problem. I've been looking forward to this one. We have actually been speaking about this for a couple of years trying to get you on. So I am pleased that we can finally bring your story to life. But let's kick things off in the Active Ingredients way. What do you believe are the three key ingredients of a successful leader and why?
I guess from my standpoint, trust, honesty, and self-confidence. And I'm not going to prioritize those. To me, they're all three very important. Very similar to the three legs of a stool. You need all three to keep the stool upright. I will start with self-confidence, though, and I'm not talking about ego. I'm talking about the fact that you have to be confident in yourself to trust. You have to be confident in yourself to be vulnerable, and that's how you build trust. And part of that is the honesty as well. When you're honest with people, you gain that trust. But a less confident person won't be willing to take that risk, won't be vulnerable, won't become trustful so that the individuals will trust that person. So to me, those are the three most important parts of leadership, and everything else builds from there.
Yeah, and self-confidence, that's actually the first time that's been used in the Active Ingredients so far. I really like it because there's also self-confidence in decision-making, because there's no worse decision than no decision, right?
Absolutely.
So it's quite interesting that it's the first time it's come through, but it also, as you say, is the other pillar for trust and honesty. So
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So when it comes to your kind of foundations of leadership, let's have a look at the early years. Were there signs at school or college that you were going to be a leader? Were you like one of the sports team or anything like that?
Yeah, so in high school, I did not feel like a leader. It was only when I went to college, I actually went to school on an ROTC scholarship. Joined the Army, and they paid for 4 years at school. And along the way, during those 4 years as a cadet, you go through a lot of leadership training. But at the same time, in college, I started to realize that I liked being a leader in my private life as well. Is activities, parties, and getting a bunch of people together to go skiing. And then that was happening at the same time that I was going through the leadership training in the Army. But at the same time, again, I'm going to talk about self-confidence a lot. During those 4 years in college, I'm jumping out of airplanes and I'm getting dragged behind helicopters and doing things that I never thought I would be capable of in the past. And once you start getting that confidence, you say, I can do this. I can lead people. I'm more comfortable with who I am, and can take that into a leadership role. So it's personal, and it's also the military. And at the same time, you're going through classroom training of what does a good leader look like? What do we expect of a leader? And how are you different by being a leader?
Yeah, it's really interesting as well, because not everybody's getting that in their late teens, early 20s, because that's proper leadership, from textbook one of the greatest leadership Bibles I'd imagine that there is.
And you're talking about making a decision. You have to have that self-confidence. As a younger individual, I didn't have that confidence and couldn't make decisions as easily as I do now. Clearly, I'm not a young man, and I've learned a lot along the way. I used to require a lot of data before making a decision. But with that confidence becomes a little bit more ability to say, okay, we've got 51% versus 49. Let's go. Let's go. And it all started back there again, gaining confidence in the things we do.
Yeah, I love it. And also, if you're jumping out of aeroplanes, was there and all of that kind of good stuff? Was there a little bit of like, I don't want to say an addiction to self-confidence, but like, were all of these things just constantly building and compounding and snowballing that you were chucking yourself into all of these cool things?
It was, but luckily along the way, you have your checkpoints because you do have those failures and it keeps you humble. Oh, you get too many wins and you start to get that ego, which is not good. So then you get, and I'll talk about that in a little while, about some failures along the way. So you say, okay, I'm not invincible, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try again. It doesn't mean I'm not going to continue to be confident in what I do.
Yeah, love it. And were there any signposts aside from leadership? Were there any signposts at that point for life sciences? Had you seen anybody going into the industry? Did you have an awareness of the industry at that point?
Not at all. Not at all. Um, when I talk to young people, they talk about, I have to do this because this is what I want to do for life. So here are the steps along the way. And if I look at my career and I look at many people's careers, that you don't know, and it's life that takes you in certain directions. When I started jumping out of planes and getting dragged behind helicopters, that's what I wanted to do for life. And then along the way, I said, maybe I want to go help people at the same time. After I left active duty, went to work for Johnson and Johnson, a great company, and I learned a lot about leadership there. Um, about giving back, was heartfelt to me, and it kind of guided the rest of my career. I had a couple opportunities along my life, lucrative opportunities where I would have been going to, for example, make disposable plastics for the fast food industry. And I just couldn't look myself in the mirror and say, this is what I want to do. And then from medical device to pharmaceuticals, in the end, it kind of guided me towards life sciences, and I've stayed there.
Yeah, I love it. Great. So let's talk about that kind of leadership moment before we dive into some of the stories of your career and your life. When did you first feel like a leader? Was there a moment at college or, you know, was there a moment where you thought, do you know what? This is it. This is what I'm feeling.
It was later in life, actually. In college, I did mention that I felt that I liked it. But also, when you're a brand new second lieutenant in the Army, you're 22, 23 years old, and you're leading a group of, 30, 40 people, most of which who are older than you. Uh, Again, it's humbling, and they know a lot more than you do about being a soldier, about their specialty. So it took me a while to get more confident and more comfortable in that role. So it was probably when I took my first president job, I think, that I finally said, okay, now I feel like a leader. I did have a little bit of that imposter syndrome. It's like, I hope I don't let this company down. I hope I don't let the people down. But it was probably in my early 30s before I really firmly felt like a leader.
Yeah. And that imposter syndrome is something that some people do get when they're, thrust into leadership at an early age and then they're taking on the challenges and rolling with the punches. And then all of a sudden it's that moment, as you say, that dawns on you that you've probably taken a few leadership steps to get to president, you know. But then was that moment where you thought, okay, right, now I'm in my flow, I'm in the groove, I'm getting my head around this now.
Absolutely. There's that epiphany. I got this.
Yeah,
And, and,
good.
and it comes. It does.
Yeah. Um, so let's talk about leadership. Okay. Let's talk about the foundations of your leadership model? Because um, it was obviously shaped by being in the army. What did your military experience teach you about leadership at a young age, and I suppose leadership that has then stayed with you for good or for bad?
So many learnings along the way. You know, they talk about the traditional military leadership, giving orders, barking orders, and at the same time, I learned in the military that that's actually not the best leadership. Maybe in combat, it's very important, but there's a place even in military leadership for empathy. Is number one. One is that everyone has a purpose, everyone has a skill, and how best can you cultivate that? How best can you bring out the most in a person and work with them and give them the tools necessary? And I know along the way, a lot of people, when I was interviewing, said, "Hey, you're a military leader. Do you bark out commands?" I said, absolutely not. And it's actually because of the military that I learned that is you can be a very successful military leader without that intimidation, without that, ego, if you will.
Yeah, because you'd mentioned previously in a couple of conversations that one particular leader early on in your career taught you exactly how you didn't want to lead. Can you explain a little bit more about what happened and kind of the thesis of that?
Absolutely. There were two individuals that were my leaders. So my commander and an executive officer in the battalion. The executive officer was very successful, but he was just a mean and nasty person. But he was very successful. So as a young person, a young lieutenant, I said, I wanna be like him because I want to be successful. And I tried to emulate that. And then again, I had to look in the mirror and said, this isn't who I am. I'm not going to be like this. And then there was a specific incident that happened. It's a little bit of a long story, but I'll tell you a little bit more about it. I was a communications officer in the Army, and we were in the mountains in Germany. And as a communications battalion, what you do is you go out and you set up communications. So large towers, big satellite dish type dishes, and then that gives the communication for the Army as it moves. And we were out on a exercise, and we'd been out for 3 or 4 days, and one of my platoons just could not get the communication going. The shot wasn't working. And we'd work for 3 or 4 days, and they're up on a mountaintop, and I'm on a different mountaintop. So I went to go help them and try to figure out what was going on. And I got there, and we worked through all the details, and nothing was working. And the disc was on top of a 250-foot tower. I'm sure back then it was maybe a 100-foot tower, but as time goes on,
It's got higher
you
and higher.
embellish. So anyway, it was a very high tower. And I'm like, guys, let's go take a look at it. And said, it's getting kind of windy. We got to get this done. So we got up to the top of the tower and we're troubleshooting it, all the wire and stuff along the way. And my platoon sergeant tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "Sir, look down." He said, "I think the colonel and the major are down there." And I'm like, oh boy. So with my tail between my legs, I walked down the 250 feet. And as I got to the bottom, the major handed me the radio. Said, "The captain wants to talk to you." And the captain starts screaming at me. Said, "Lieutenant Hochuli, you're a leader. You direct your people to do it and get it done, and you should be down at the bottom." And he screamed and yelled at me for a while. And then I got off the radio, and then the major, with a little cigar butt in his mouth, he starts screaming at me about, "What are you doing? This is not the way to lead," so on and so forth. The colonel was the last person. He was a tall and he was a quiet man. And he said, "Lieutenant Hochuli, why were you on top of the tower?" I said, "Sir, we've been trying to put this shot in for 3 or 4 days and we've been unsuccessful. I thought that we went through this and I could provide another set of eyes. These guys know their equipment. They're much better than I am. And I could just look and see if I could help them. But most importantly, the weather was getting bad and they were nervous to get to the top. I said, I refuse to get them to do something that I'm not going to do myself. So I led the charge. I went up to the top, and I could also work as a safety officer that if the conditions up there got bad enough, that I'd bring them down. And he said, thank you. Got in the truck and left. Long story short, I got my officer efficiency report about 9 months later, and I was the top rated lieutenant in the battalion because of that incident. And the colonel specifically talked about what it is to be a leader. Those other two guys yelling and screaming at me, those weren't the leaders, and those were the individuals that I didn't want to be like. And 40 years later, I am thinking about that every single day because it's how I felt that day, how the colonel made me feel, and how the others felt. I may have some of the specifics about it, but that incident has stuck in my mind forever. And a little anecdote at the end. As I was going back to our headquarters, and the captain yelled at me again, but on our way, we drove what the path was. And there just happened to be a brand new 15-story building right in the path that nobody knew about. So after I got yelled at, we went to the architects of the plan, and they said, we don't know about that tower. So what we did is we turned the antenna, went to another, and it all came in fine.
I
So
love it. Yeah, it's really interesting how it seemed as though the more senior individual there had that calm presence and the curiosity to ask the question to get the answer that you gave.
absolutely, absolutely, and that comes with time and wisdom, right?
Yeah, rather than the kind of chihuahua making lots of
You
noise.
said it, I didn't.
Yeah, I'm over here. I'm a long way away. But it is interesting, though, what bad leaders sometimes teach us more than good ones.
Absolutely.
And it looks as though, like, all those years later, that kind of the understanding of as I said, yeah, that curiosity is really cut through. So what leadership principles still shape how you operate today from the military?
There's a couple of things. Is modeling. So I don't expect anyone to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. I work hard and I play hard. I'm nice to people. I want to, basically, I want to emulate what I want out of employees or people at the same time. Commitment. We're in this for the right reason. I'm in it just like you are. I'm going to work as hard the early mornings, the late nights, and then endurance. That's one of the things that I really learned in the military is you just got to keep going. When it looks, when it's the darkest, you just keep going. And running businesses, it's not that much different. You have your highs and your lows. Whether it be cash flow or revenue or bookings of new sales. You go through all those, and it's all the same thing. It's endurance, strength, and keeping your head up even when things get tough.
Yeah. And you moved then out of the military. You found yourself, as you mentioned earlier, moving into Johnson & Johnson, which was a pivotal moment for your career. And then also you're working in that manufacturing environment. Let's talk about, how your leadership adapted and why adaptable leadership matters. Because actually you came into an experience, didn't you, in a very large site, very large campus where you had to have adaptable leadership inside the same culture, in the same business, in the same building. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I left the military, I went to work directly for Johnson and Johnson in manufacturing for medical devices. And the facility in New Jersey was 1.2 million square feet. So I don't know what that is in meters, but it's big. So to get from one side of the plant to the other, I actually had a golf course because it was so far. If you got meetings to go to and you had a half-hour walk to get to the other side, you had to make it there. But I worked in different positions in operations, in supply chain, and maintenance, and in manufacturing, learning as I went along. And it was a union facility, so very strict rules. And in the early 90s, what we did is we tried to roll out self-directed work teams. So rather than the dictatorial, this is what you're going to do today is, that again, the employees had so much knowledge and skill, let them decide more of what, who does what and so on and so forth. And I was running maintenance on one end of the building at the time. And I went through 6 weeks of training on how to be a leader in a self-directed work environment. And then after, let's say, graduation from that, you went in and you actually implemented it. And the maintenance group that I had basically loved the idea. They're like, okay, great, we get to decide. They just embraced it, and we became much more efficient, much more effective, and just it was phenomenal results. Very proud of myself. And then my boss came to me and said, Tom, things went so well. I want you to do the exact same thing at the other maintenance group that's on the other side of the building. So I took over control of both groups. And then I went and implemented the self-directed work teams down there. And that project failed miserably. Absolutely. There was nothing that was successful about it. It was just miserable. And I had to do some self-reflection at the time, and it's really where I learned about situational leadership. What I failed to do is to understand the culture of the two different areas. My first group, it was a younger group and newer to Johnson and Johnson, newer to the contract and the labor union, and a little bit more open to differences. The group on the other end had been there for 30 plus years, the majority of them. They didn't want to hear anything new. They had been accustomed to the same things for 30 years, and they didn't want change. And I failed to realize that. Figured, oh, it worked once, it's going to work twice. So what I had to do is I had to readjust my strategy, change the way I approached it, and it became successful in the end. It was much more difficult. We didn't get as much accomplished, but to me that was a major learning point. And I've taken that everywhere I've gone as well. Is you got to really read the room and understand what the DNA of the group is, what the culture is, and what the paradigms are. And then you start to introduce change.
Yeah. And on that self-confidence, were you absolutely flying after the first implementation? I bet you were kind of off the golf cart, ready for the second. Let's go, guys. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Bit of humbling coming on.
Absolutely. I thought I crushed this. I nailed this. And then the second one, I came back with my tail between my legs. I'm like,
Yeah.
what just happened? Yeah.
But you strike me as somebody, as you said though, that thinks about things deeply, wants to get the plan in place and get the modeling right. What did it teach you about how to communicate and adapt as a leader then second time round?
So it actually started to build my way of working in complete transparency. Is I didn't ask enough questions when I went to that second group, and I should have done that. To this day, every time I talk to a group for the first time, I always introduce myself and then say, "What you're going to get from me is the good, the bad, and the ugly." And that I will tell you, when we've had a good day and we've had a bad day. I'm going to be honest with you. So for that group, I could have said, "Hey, listen, this is what we want to do, and this is why we want to do it. Let me, what's your feedback? Tell me about it. It's not going to be easy, and I think I probably would have gotten more feedback and read how against this change they were, and I just went, shoulder first, implemented the change, and that's why it failed. So it's again from that point on more two-way dialogue, because to me that's very important. And again, it's about that trust. It's the two-way trust. You build that trust, and then after they started understanding what we wanted to do, you start to see some cracks in the ice, and people start warming up to the situation a little bit better.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you kind of learn, as you said, two-way dialogue, got deeper into the minds of those teams. So you had the younger, fresher, maybe non-unionized group, and then those with a little bit more experience and maybe that needed a little bit more cajoling, a bit more change management. Do you think that some leaders fail because they just don't recognize the difference between the groups?
Absolutely. And to me, it's somewhat of that ego as well as that those leaders think they know better than everybody else. And to me, the best leaders can get the most out of the groups. And it doesn't have to be consensus, but understanding and opening, getting the group to open up and listen rather than say, it's my way or the highway. I just do not respect that at all. It's how best can we work together and work through this. Here's the objective. Here's our mission. Here's our vision. Here are our values. And this is how we're going to work together. And, if you think that the mission should change a little bit, talk to me about this. How are we going to change that rather than say, I don't care. This is what we're doing. Move on.
Yeah,
And that's where I see leaders fail.
yeah. And also they fail sometimes in the actual understanding of the teams or understanding how to build teams.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you've been able to build teams across some of the largest companies in the industry, and then some of the most transformative, some of the most innovative. If we're looking across operations, manufacturing, in cell and gene therapy, in lots of different parts of the businesses, lots of different parts of life sciences, you've been able to build consistently strong teams. So how or what does the team DNA mean for you, and how do you create that?
To me, it's setting a common mission or culture. It's basically alignment. It's why are we here and what are we working for? And again, it's different. I remember when I was at Biologics, I was sitting in a room and there were 13 PhDs in me, and there were only 12 people in the room. So I'm like, wait, what? So two of the people in the room had two PhDs. I had zero, and that's how we got to that. But the way what they wanted to do was more of this is how we want to improve the world and change the world. I said, that is great, but at the same time, if we're not successful as a business, we can't do that. So let's make sure we have alignment here. Is our way to change and improve people's quality of life is by being a successful business. So here's what we can do. Here's what we probably can't do, and align it that way. And then if you're talking to a different group, it may be operators. Is what's important to them is pay, is environmental health and safety, and how they feel. And it's getting aligned on that. Is we're going to make your life as easy as possible. Again, to get to that same mission. Same two missions ultimately for the PhD group and the guys that are out on the floor. But that DNA is going to be a little bit different for those two groups, and you gotta understand that.
Yeah. So it seems as though, back to that kind of trust and accountability and understanding, putting in the hard work to really understand the different groups and then kind of bring that all together. Are there any other non-negotiables that you've worked towards over the years of creating high performing teams?
Is non-negotiable is accepting people that aren't nice and kind to each other. To me that is non-negotiable. Is we're here, trust and respect. And if you disrespect the individuals on the team, I don't think you play a part in this team. And as a leader, you think through that, going, this individual is just phenomenal, but is not in line with the culture of this group. This individual should not be with this group. And hard decisions are made along the way. And I've made a lot of those hard decisions, but in the end, never regretted one of them. I mean, but is those decisions, again, yeah, I have to be looking in my self in the mirror afterwards and say, was I fair with this individual and was I kind to this individual, regardless of what the issue was. Was I fair and was I kind to that individual? And with very few exceptions, I can say that.
Yeah, human decency, honesty, fairness, these are all outstanding values that, if you can communicate them as well and make sure that your team understand that that's what you think is important, what your values are, it's easy to then get alignment. And if people are outside of that, then, they're dealt with and either brought back in or, as you say, don't last the test of time with the team.
Yeah, or they realize that they're not the right person for that team, and say, okay, I don't fit with that culture. Maybe I should do something else.
And
And
how Yeah, because I was going to say, how do you manage as well? Because you've worked in some highly purposeful but pressurized environments. When the pressure is on within a working group, sometimes the values are misaligned slightly because of the stress levels. The stressometer starts to tick up a little bit. How do you think great teams separate themselves from average teams in those high pressure moments?
well, to me, you really have to set that alignment before those high pressure situations come. Because I've seen it many times. I'm like, oh, this team is getting along so well, and then you get into a little bit of a problem, whether it be something's not shipping or you had a failed batch, and then you start to see fragmentation in the group. And it's going back to, we were aligned on the mission. We knew this wasn't going to be easy. We're doing this for this purpose. So we don't have to be emotional or anything about this. Is we knew this was coming, and we've talked about this before. So let's work again. Respect for each other, trust for each other. All those things that we said were part of our values. They are for the good and the bad times, and you need to remember that. And hopefully that it brings people back together.
And are you hoping to be that kind of calm presence to bring people back to the mission and the vision?
I honestly, I have worked on that my entire life. Is uh, back to, I think it was Apocalypse Now, when the colonel was standing on the beach and all the artillery was falling and he was just calm. I'm like, that's to me what not, I don't want to be in that situation, but it's the same thing. Is when everything's happening and not everything's going perfectly, not emotional, under calm. I think this is what the situation is, and I think this is what the path to get out of the situation is. So yeah, I've always tried to be that person in the room.
Nice. And then you've been able to, really take some big steps throughout your career, from site leader to CEO. Within, there's a career thread behind the operational leadership. Looking back, what connected your journey, do you think, from operations to, the CEO leadership role?
Back before, I was talking about the fact that sometimes life takes you in different directions and you don't know where your career is going to go. But one of my philosophies has always been, I'm going to prepare myself for that opportunity. So along the way, I want to learn all about this business. And at J&J, it was nice because I got to work in all aspects of operations. So I got all that, and they said, okay, I need to understand finance a little bit more. So I went back and got my MBA. So I'm like, okay, now I understand. I don't agree with our accountants, but now I understand why they're doing what they're doing. And always, I try to be the person in the room when someone says, we got to do this, but it's going to fail. I don't know how to do that. I was raising my hand saying, I'll give it a shot. Somebody's got to do it, and we're all saying that it's not going to go well, but I'll give it a shot. So I always put myself in those situations so I could learn. So I was ready for that opportunity if it came in front of me. So when I was a site leader, I got the opportunity, a headhunter from a private equity firm came to me and said, we have this CEO role that's open. And my first reaction was, ooh, I'm not prepared. You get a little of that nervousness. And I thought through it is I've run operations. I know all the back administrative aspects, HR and quality and so on and so forth, but maybe not as much on the commercial side because that was a little bit of my blind spot in my background. But when I was at Lonza, I ran a 550 person site, and sales and business development would bring the customer in. And what sold our business and our product was not the product, it was the people. And it was our senior leadership team. And I had spent a lot of time cultivating that group. We had PhD, as I said, we had so many PhDs there, just brilliant people. And we found the right ones that could talk to customers. So it's, the customer comes in, and that's how we sold the product, which was a CDMO or a service. So I said to myself, I do understand what business development is. It's a little bit of, I'm not positive, but I'm going to learn, so I'm going to jump in. So I raised my hand and I started as CEO of that role. But to me, that's a little bit of a, recommendation to people as well is get a little outside of your comfort zone. Take a little bit of a risk. You can't always know what's going on. You don't want to be reckless. Don't tell people you can do things that you obviously can't do, but if it's a little bit of a stretch, go for it and raise your hand.
Yeah, sometimes it's about as well, putting the puzzle piece in a different way, but it's still fitting.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and what it strikes me as is somebody that has got you know the risk appetite, but also the self-awareness. It took a little bit of unpacking for you to say, actually, I have got commercial acumen from building teams in this world, and then it's just presenting it in a different way. Do you think that that's where maybe some operational leaders struggle? If they're too operations, they're too site orientated, do they then struggle to take on the bigger executive roles?
I think it's two things. They do struggle with that, but again, you can be very successful in a smaller organization or at a site by being too much into the details. And you can run the operation very well, but if you're making all the decisions, you're not trusting people, you're not delegating, you can't take that next step. Because as a CEO, you have to rely on your CFO. I know basic accounting and, again, from school, but it's really surrounding yourself with experts that you trust, that you respect, and in some cases that you fear will take your job. To me, that is a cornerstone of my hiring philosophy. I want to hire people that scare me because then I know that I've done the right thing. Is that this person is so good at their job, eventually they may sit in my seat. So you have to be self-confident and you have to take that risk. Some people aren't willing to take that risk. So if you jump from site operations where you're running everything, you get into an executive role and you try to run everything, you're going to fail.
Yeah, and that's where, again, back to that trust, you've got to trust the leaders that you're bringing into the business and trust to give them the space to perform in the roles that they're trying to do within your leadership team.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give to future CEOs, I suppose, coming from an operational background? Because you've got lots of bits that you just mentioned there. What would be your biggest piece of advice?
So again, be comfortable with what you know and be comfortable with what you don't know. Is you can learn along the way. Surround yourself with brilliant people and find the people that match your culture as well. Is they can be an A player, but if they don't match the culture, they're not going to help you. And then as a senior leader, as an executive leader, move obstacles for people. Don't do their job. Help them by removing the obstacles so they can flourish and they can do their job. And then just sit back and be amazed at how good they are.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I want to dig into your thoughts on the future here. Okay. So, what excites you about the future of life sciences?
There's a couple of things. I know everybody talks about AI. No matter where you are, whether it be Chat GPT or Claude or whatever it is. Some people fear it. Some people want to stop it. Some people fear that it's going to take our jobs. I think it's a great tool, and it's a lot more than Chat GPT. It's a machine learning, and if we can use that to increase, speed up, and improve drug development, medical device development, biologics, that is all a benefit for us. And I don't think it has to replace the leadership that's necessary. To me, we've had tools along the way, whether it be systems, you go back 50 years, more than that, and people were doing accounting on paper, right? And then enterprise resource planning tools came out, and that was an aid for everyone to run the business. So it would do all the calculations. So then you just spot check it and move on. To me, it's the same thing for AI. It's a great tool. I get more data and more information these days that doesn't take a year to develop the software. Within 3 weeks, I have a dashboard. I've only been in the role for about 4 months now. I have a dashboard that tells me absolutely everything. And to me, that is a great tool to help leaders. It's not going to replace leaders. You still need that human contact. I mean, from just simple things like customer contact. Customers will do a lot of GEO or AI searches for what they're looking for, but they want to talk to somebody in the end, and it's that sealing that deal. To me, it's the same in business or whatever you're doing. It's a good tool. It's not going to replace leaders. You're not going to have a cyborg running the company, but it's just a great aid for everyone in business, especially leaders.
Yeah. I was reading something the other day that there's going to be so much AI powering so many different aspects, as you say, of data and all of these things. It's going to be almost like, electricity running your computer or your office. Everything's going to have a bit of AI in there to speed up the way in which we can then get information at our fingertips, but then it's what you do with it and then how you can lead with it as well. That's the most important piece.
Absolutely, and to me, it's similar to like a doctor. Is that you're always going to need that doctor at your bedside, but that individual will have AI to research, thousands or millions of cases very similar to yours that they wouldn't be exposed to otherwise, to help in their diagnosis, to help you out. So to me, it's the same for business.
Yeah, your bedside manner with a human is going to be better than a bedside manner with a bot.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And what about the future of leadership? What excites you here?
Um, to me, it's a new frontier, and that as I mentioned many times today about situational leadership, I think our leaders have to evolve, understand the current dynamics and what the future dynamics are, and change your skill set or your bag of tools as technology changes, as the environment changes, and as the markets change. I still think that for life sciences, we are moving towards more personalized medicine and more point of care. So that means for our industry, smaller organizations that are specific. So fewer of the huge companies, more of the nimble and agile smaller companies that specifically going after one disease state, and it's a different type of leadership that you need for that size business than a global billion-dollar pharmaceutical company.
Yeah. And my final question, okay, what advice would you give to the next generation of leaders, either building careers in operations, manufacturing, site leadership? What's your piece of advice?
Um, First of all, So keep on beating the dead horse. Self-confidence. Be confident in yourself. To start out with, take risks. I'm not saying be reckless by any means, but put yourself into situations that make you uncomfortable and learn from them. You're gonna fail. Everyone fails. Don't let it stop you. I hate to quote Mike Tyson, but everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. I've been punched in the mouth a lot, and it's okay. Now I pivot. Doesn't mean I'm not going back into that ring. It's I learned from this. You're gonna fail. I learned from it, and it's how you respond to that failure that makes you a good leader.
Perfect. Love it. Thank you. That's some great advice. Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a long time in the making this. I've thoroughly enjoyed our discussion. It seems as though it's gone in about 10 seconds. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you again so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom.